The champagne flutes caught the afternoon light streaming through the cathedral windows I'd designed 15 years ago. Funny how everything looks different when you're about to watch your life get demolished in the same venue where you once celebrated your greatest architectural triumph. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Harold, you're at table 12, Lillian announced without looking up from her seating chart, her manicured fingers dancing across the expensive paper like a spider weaving its web. "Near the kitchen. I thought you'd appreciate being close to the service staff." I adjusted my tie and smiled that practiced smile I'd perfected over 37 years of marriage. "How thoughtful of you, dear. Nothing says father of the bride like being seated next to the coat check." Our daughter Cassie's wedding venue hummed with pre-ceremony energy. Florists arranged my wife's meticulously chosen white orchids, while caterers set up the reception hall. Everything was perfect, expensive, and designed to impress the social elite of our coastal Maine community. Everything except my place in it. "Dad, please don't start," Cassie whispered, appearing at my elbow in her ivory silk gown. At 26, she was beautiful, successful, and completely under her mother's thumb. "This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life." "Of course it is, sweetheart." I kissed her forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with hairspray and nervous sweat. "I just find it amusing that the man who designed this building gets seated with Uncle Sal and his oxygen tank." Lillian's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "Harold, you're being dramatic. Gordon suggested the seating arrangement, and I thought it made perfect sense." Gordon Stratton, the groom's father, real estate mogul, and my wife's not-so-secret obsession for the past 8 months. At 61, he had the kind of artificial charm that came from years of closing deals and crushing competitors. His silver hair was professionally styled, his tan professionally maintained, and his interest in my wife professionally disguised as friendship. "Gordon has such wonderful ideas," I replied, watching as said wonderful man approached with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Lillian, their fingers lingering just a moment too long. "Tell me, Gordon, what other aspects of my family have you been helping to arrange?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Gordon's smile never wavered, but something flickered behind his pale blue eyes. "Just trying to make sure everything runs smoothly for the kids, Harold, you understand?" "Oh, I understand perfectly." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken over the past month. Lillian and Gordon at lunch, Lillian and Gordon at the country club, Lillian and Gordon entering his downtown penthouse at 2 in the afternoon last Tuesday. "Crystal clear, actually." Cassie grabbed my arm. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Nothing yet, honey. Just admiring the view." I pocketed the phone and straightened my cufflinks. "Shall we get this show started?" The ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. Mark, our new son-in-law, was a decent kid who unfortunately inherited his father's weak chin and weaker spine. He stumbled through his vows while Gordon beamed from the front row, his hand resting possessively on the back of Lillian's chair. I sat in my assigned spot at table 12, making small talk with distant relatives and family friends who'd been strategically placed in social Siberia along with me. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was watching my daughter's future unfold in a building I'd poured my heart into, while my own marriage crumbled in real time. During the reception, Lillian stood to make her mother of the bride toast. She looked radiant in her designer dress, her blonde hair swept up to show off the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 20th anniversary, back when I thought our marriage meant something. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass toward the head table. "Sometimes we have to let go of the past to embrace a brighter future." Gordon nodded approvingly from his seat beside her. His hand dropped below the table, and I watched Lillian's expression soften in that way it used to soften for me. Once upon a time, in another lifetime, when I was naive enough to believe that 37 years of marriage meant something more than a legal document and shared real estate. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me. The conversations faded down like someone had turned down the volume on life itself. That's beautiful, Lillian. Truly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. Since we're talking about new beginnings and letting go of the past, I have a wedding gift for Cassie and Mark. Cassie's face lit up with hope and anticipation. Poor kids still believed in fairy tale endings and fathers who played by the rules. This, I said, holding up the envelope, is the deed to the house on Beacon Hill. The one your mother and I looked at last month. The one worth approximately $2.3 million. The one I was planning to give you as a wedding present. The room was silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Was planning to, I repeated, tearing the envelope in half. Then in half again. But since I apparently don't belong at this family celebration, neither does my gift. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like expensive confetti. Lillian's face went white, then red, then an interesting shade of purple I'd never seen before. "Harold," she hissed, half standing from her chair. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Exactly what you suggested, darling. Letting go of the past." I smiled at the stunned faces around me, tipped an imaginary hat to Gordon, and walked toward the exit. "Enjoy your new beginning." The last thing I heard before the doors closed behind me was Cassie starting to cry and Lillian's voice rising to a pitch that could shatter the crystal chandelier I'd specifically chosen for this room. Time to go home and plan my next move. The mansion felt different when I returned that evening. Bigger somehow and emptier, like a museum after closing time. 43 rooms of architectural perfection, and every single one of them echoing with the sound of my footsteps and my wife's betrayal. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and settled into my study, surrounded by the awards and accolades from a career spent designing other people's dreams. The irony tasted bitter, even with the expensive whiskey chasing it down. My phone buzzed with text messages. Cassie begging me to call her back, my brother asking what the hell happened at the wedding. 3 messages from Lillian that started apologetic and quickly devolved into threats about lawyers and divorce proceedings. Nothing from Gordon, of course. He was probably too busy consoling my grieving wife. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd been building for the past 2 months. Photos, credit card statements, phone records, hotel receipts. The digital breadcrumbs of a marriage's destruction, carefully cataloged by a man who'd spent his career understanding how structures fail. The affair had started innocently enough. Lillian and Gordon served together on the hospital charity board, planning fundraisers and glad-handing wealthy donors. But innocent lunches became intimate dinners, and intimate dinners became afternoon visits to his penthouse apartment downtown. I'd hired a private investigator named Rick Morrison, a former student of mine who'd switched from architecture to private security after a divorce of his own. Rick had a talent for being invisible and a camera that captured everything in high-definition detail. The photos told the story better than any novelist could. Lillian's hand on Gordon's thigh at the country club bar. Gordon's lips on Lillian's neck in the parking garage of the Marriott. The 2 of them entering his apartment building together on 17 different occasions over the past 3 months. But the real treasure was in the financial records. Lillian had been busy, moving money from our joint accounts into a private account she'd opened with Gordon's help. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers disguised as charitable donations and home improvement expenses. She'd also been working with her friends Janet Morrison and Trish Caldwell to quietly liquidate some of my art collection. Pieces I'd collected over decades, sold to private buyers through Janet's gallery connections. The money went straight into Lillian's secret account. My phone rang, interrupting my detective work. Rick's name appeared on the screen. "Tell me you have good news," I answered. Depends on your definition of good. I followed Gordon after the wedding. He went straight to his office, made about 6 phone calls, then drove to your wife's sister's house in Portland. Margaret's place, what's he doing there? Based on the 3 suitcases Lillian carried out to his car, I'd say they're planning an extended vacation or a permanent relocation. I set down my bourbon and walked to the window overlooking the garden Lillian had redesigned 5 years ago. She'd spent $40,000 on Japanese maples and imported stone, creating a Zen paradise that was supposed to represent our enduring love. Where are they going? Flight to Boston tomorrow morning, then a connection to Paris. First class, open-ended return. Looks like your wife is ready to start that new beginning she toasted tonight. Is she now? I smiled at my reflection in the dark window. That's interesting, considering she doesn't actually have access to the money she thinks she has. What do you mean? I mean, I've been moving assets too, Rick. The difference is I own the house, I own the accounts, and I own the business. Lillian's been stealing from herself without realizing it. I'd spent the past month quietly restructuring our finances with the help of my attorney and accountant. Everything that mattered was now held in trusts and corporations that Lillian couldn't touch. The joint accounts she'd been raiding contained just enough money to let her think she was getting away with something. So, what's the plan? Rick asked. First, we make sure they don't make that flight. Then we give them something to really run away from. I hung up and walked down to my workshop in the basement. The space was filled with architectural models, drafting tables, and the tools of my trade. But tucked away in a corner, behind a false wall I'd built during the house's construction, was my real sanctuary. The hidden room contained everything I'd need for what came next. Copies of every document, photograph, and financial record related to Lillian's betrayal, computer equipment for monitoring phone calls and text messages, and detailed floor plans for every building that mattered in Gordon's life, including his penthouse apartment, which I'd designed 12 years ago when he first moved to town and wanted to make an impression on the local elite. Funny how clients never remember to change the locks when they fire their architect's son-in-law from the maintenance company. I spent the next hour reviewing the penthouse plans, noting every entrance, every security camera, and every structural detail. Then I made a list of everything I'd need for tomorrow night's activities. Gordon wanted to play games with my family? Fine. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail about architects. We always know where the weak points are. By the time I finished planning, it was nearly 2 a.m. I poured another bourbon and toasted my empty house. To new beginnings, I said aloud, echoing Lillian's words from the wedding. Just not yours. Rain hammered against the windows of Gordon's penthouse building as I stood in the parking garage, studying the architectural drawings I'd created over a decade ago. The security cameras had blind spots I'd deliberately designed into the system, and the service elevator still used the same override code from the original installation. Some advantages of being the architect never fade. It was just past midnight when I made my way to the 23rd floor, carrying a leather messenger bag filled with the tools of my trade: lockpicks, a glass cutter, latex gloves, and a few special items I'd acquired for tonight's performance. Gordon's apartment door opened with embarrassing ease. Rich men always assume their money protects them from consequences, but they rarely invest in decent security. I disabled the alarm system using the master code I'd programmed during construction, then slipped inside. The penthouse was exactly as I'd designed it: floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline, imported marble floors, and enough square footage to house a small family. Gordon had decorated it like a bachelor pad designed by someone who'd never actually been a bachelor. All leather furniture and expensive art chosen by interior designers who charged by the hour. I found what I was looking for in his home office: a wall safe hidden behind a reproduction Monet that probably cost more than most people's cars. The combination was pathetically predictable: his birthday followed by Lillian's. Some secrets hide in plain sight. Inside the safe were the documents I'd expected to find: Financial records showing Gordon's real estate empire wasn't quite as stable as he pretended. Contracts with city officials that skirted the edge of legality, and a thick folder labeled LK containing photographs, love letters, and detailed plans for their European escape. But the real treasure was Lillian's handwritten notes outlining their scheme to force me out of my own house. They'd planned everything: the public humiliation, the financial manipulation, even the timing of their affair's revelation. According to her careful timeline, I was supposed to discover their relationship next month after they'd finished liquidating my assets. Too bad for them, I'd always been ahead of schedule. I photographed everything with a high-resolution camera, then returned the documents to their original positions. But I left a few additions of my own: printouts of their hotel receipts, copies of the financial transfers, and a single photograph of them together at the country club with a handwritten note on the back: "Smile, you're on candid camera." The sound of the elevator arriving sent me into the guest bedroom, where I waited behind the door with my heart hammering against my ribs. Footsteps in the hallway, then Gordon's voice talking on his phone. "No, Lillian, he can't do anything to stop us. The money's already transferred, and by the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in France." I smiled in the darkness. "Wrong on both counts, Gordon." He ended the call and walked into his office. I heard the safe opening, then a long moment of silence followed by creative profanity that would have impressed a construction crew. "What the hell?" Gordon's voice cracked like a teenage boy's. I stepped into the doorway, casual as a neighbor borrowing sugar. "Evening, Gordon. Mind if I come in? Oh wait, I'm already here." He spun around, his face cycling through surprise, fear, and anger in rapid succession. "Harold, what are you doing here? This is breaking and entering." "Actually, it's just entering. I still have keys from when I designed this place. Amazing how often clients forget to ask for them back." I settled into his expensive leather chair and crossed my legs. "Nice safe combination, by the way. Very romantic." "You snake. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. I'd love to explain to them what I found in your safe, especially the parts about bribing city inspectors and planning to defraud your business partners." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photographs I'd taken. "This one's my favorite. Lillian's detailed budget for spending my money on your European vacation." Gordon's hand froze halfway to his phone. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city I'd helped build with 40 years of architectural work. "I want my wife to stop stealing from me. I want you to stop screwing her in hotels I'm paying for. And I want both of you to understand that actions have consequences." "Harold, listen." "No, you listen." I turned back to face him, letting him see the smile that had been hiding behind 37 years of polite conversation. "You made a mistake, Gordon. A big one. You assumed I was just some old architect who'd roll over and let you destroy my family, but you forgot something important." "What's that?" "Architects understand structural engineering. We know exactly where to apply pressure to bring down even the strongest buildings." I walked past him toward the door, pausing to straighten a picture frame on his mantel. "Oh, and Gordon? You might want to check your parking garage. I'm afraid I had a little accident with some paint thinner near your Porsche. Terribly sorry about that." His face went white. "You didn't. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't watch where they're going." I opened the apartment door and stepped into the hallway. "Give my regards to Lillian. Tell her I'll see her soon." The elevator ride down felt like floating. For the first time in months, I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the architect of my own revenge, and the foundation was just getting started. By the time Gordon made it to the parking garage, I was already 3 blocks away, listening to his screaming phone call to Lillian through the listening device I'd planted in his office. Some structures take years to build, others can be demolished in a single night. The annual Harbor Lights Charity Gala was Lillian's favorite social event of the year, a chance for the local elite to write tax-deductible checks while congratulating themselves on their generosity. She'd been planning this year's event for months, working closely with Gordon to secure the venue, arrange the catering, and ensure maximum visibility for their supposed philanthropic efforts. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning too. I arrived at the country club in my best tuxedo, driving the vintage Jaguar I'd restored in my workshop. My date for the evening was Sandra Morrison, Rick's sister, and one of the city's most respected civil rights attorneys. She was intelligent, beautiful, and completely immune to the social posturing that defined events like this. "Are you sure about this plan?" Sandra asked as we walked through the club's marble foyer. "Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment my wife decided to steal from me and humiliate me in public. I straightened my bow tie and smiled at the familiar faces beginning to fill the ballroom. Besides, all I'm doing is sharing some interesting photographs with people who might appreciate them. The ballroom was decorated in Lillian's signature style: white flowers, gold accents, and enough crystal to blind a small aircraft. She stood near the entrance greeting guests, resplendent in a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Gordon hovered nearby, playing the role of devoted friend and charitable board member. Neither of them noticed me until I was standing directly in front of them. "Lillian, you look absolutely radiant." I kissed her cheek, noting the way she stiffened at my touch. "Gordon, how's the car situation working out?" Gordon's jaw tightened. "Fine, Harold. Just fine." "Glad to hear it. I'd hate to think my clumsiness caused any permanent damage." I turned to Sandra and made introductions. "Darling, I'd like you to meet my wife Lillian and her close friend Gordon Stratton." Sandra's smile was professionally perfect. "Charmed. Harold's told me so much about both of you." Lillian's eyes narrowed. "Has he? How interesting. I didn't realize Harold was dating already." "Oh, we're not dating," Sandra replied smoothly. "I'm his attorney. He's retained me to handle some rather delicate legal matters involving asset protection and fraud prevention." The color drained from Gordon's face like water from a broken pipe. Lillian's smile became brittle enough to shatter. "How lovely," Lillian managed. "Well, we should circulate. So many important people to see tonight." "Of course. Don't let us keep you." I took Sandra's arm and led her toward the bar. "We'll catch up later. I have a feeling this is going to be a very memorable evening." We spent the next hour mingling with the crowd, accepting congratulations on Cassie's wedding, and deflecting questions about the dramatic, gift-destroying incident. I made sure to speak with every major donor, every board member, and every local reporter covering the event. At 9 o'clock, the formal program began. The club's president welcomed everyone and introduced the evening's speakers, including Lillian as the event's primary organizer. She took the stage with practiced confidence, her speech about community service and giving back flowing like expensive wine. "Tonight is about more than raising money," she told the assembled crowd. "It's about transparency, accountability, and ensuring that our charitable efforts reflect the highest ethical standards." I almost choked on my champagne. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. When Lillian finished her speech, the president returned to the podium. "Before we continue with the evening's program, we have a special presentation from one of our community's most respected architects and longtime club member, Harold Kingsley." Lillian's head snapped toward me so fast, I'm surprised she didn't get whiplash. This wasn't part of her carefully planned program. I walked to the podium, adjusting the microphone and smiling at the expectant faces in the audience. "Thank you. I know this is unexpected, but I felt it was important to share something with all of you tonight. Something about transparency and accountability." The lights dimmed as Rick activated the projection system from the back of the room. The first image appeared on the large screen behind me. Lillian and Gordon entering his apartment building together, the timestamp clearly visible in the corner. A murmur ran through the crowd like electricity through water. As Lillian mentioned, Transparency is crucial in all our endeavors, I continued, advancing to the next slide, especially when it comes to how charitable funds are managed and distributed. The next image showed financial records documenting transfers from the charity's accounts to Gordon's personal business ventures. Perfectly legal, but ethically questionable loans that had never been disclosed to the board. Lillian stood frozen near her table, her face cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. Gordon was already moving toward the exit, but Rick and 2 security guards blocked his path. I think it's important for everyone to understand exactly how their donations have been used, I said, clicking through a series of documents showing inflated catering costs, kickbacks to vendors, and mysterious consulting fees paid to shell companies Gordon controlled. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were talking, pointing, and pulling out their phones to capture the unfolding drama. But I saved the best for last. And finally, I think you should all know about the personal relationships that have influenced these financial decisions. The screen filled with the photograph of Lillian and Gordon kissing in his penthouse, taken through the window with a telephoto lens. The ballroom erupted. Conversations became arguments. Board members demanded explanations, and reporters started asking very pointed questions about fiduciary responsibility and conflicts of interest. I stepped away from the podium and walked back to Sandra, who was watching the chaos with professional appreciation. Think that was enough transparency? I asked. I'd say you've exceeded expectations, she replied. Look. Cassie had entered the ballroom with Mark, both of them still in casual clothes from their honeymoon departure. She walked straight to the microphone, her face set with determination I hadn't seen since she was a child. Excuse me, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. I have something to say. The room gradually quieted, all eyes on the young woman who'd been at the center of yesterday's wedding drama. I want everyone to know that I've been aware of my mother's affair for 3 months, Cassie announced. I hoped she would end it and try to save her marriage to my father. Instead, she chose to steal from him, humiliate him, and try to destroy our family for her own selfish purposes. Lillian started toward the stage, but Cassie held up her hand. I'm not finished. As of tonight, I'm cutting all ties with my mother and Gordon Stratton. They don't represent my values or my family's values. My father is the most honest, decent man I know, and I'm ashamed that it took me this long to stand up for him. The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo that shook the crystal chandeliers. Cassie walked over to me and wrapped her arms around my neck. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. I hugged her tight, feeling like a father again for the first time in months. When I looked up, Lillian and Gordon were gone, along with Janet and Trish. They'd slipped out during Cassie's speech, probably hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of their reputations. But I wasn't finished with them yet, not by a long shot. They came for the house at 2 a.m, thinking darkness would hide their desperation. I watched them on the security monitors I'd installed throughout the property, Lillian using her key to enter through the kitchen door, Gordon following with a flashlight and what looked like a crowbar, Janet and Trish bringing up the rear with empty suitcases and the kind of nervous energy that comes from committing crimes you're not qualified to commit. I was waiting in my study with a cup of coffee and a loaded camera, feeling remarkably calm for a man whose home was being invaded by his wife and her criminal associates. Harold? Lillian's voice echoed through the hallway, artificially sweet like poisoned honey. Are you here? We need to talk. I didn't answer. Let them search. Let them think they had the advantage of surprise while I watched their every move on high-definition monitors and recorded everything for posterity. They split up to cover more ground. Lillian headed for our bedroom to collect her jewelry and personal items. Gordon went straight for my study looking for financial documents, and Janet and Trish started loading my art collection into their suitcases like common thieves, which, I suppose, is exactly what they were. I waited until Gordon was alone in my study, fumbling through my desk drawers with his flashlight before I made my entrance. "Looking for something specific?" I asked, switching on the lights. Gordon spun around, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Jesus Christ, Harold, you scared the hell out of me. Sorry about that. I thought you might appreciate some illumination for your burglary activities." I settled into my chair and gestured toward the desk he'd been ransacking. "Please, don't let me interrupt. I'm curious to see what you think is valuable enough to steal." "This isn't stealing. Lillian has a right to her personal property." "Absolutely. But I don't recall her name being on the deed to this house, or on the titles to any of the art you and her friends are currently stuffing into suitcases." I pulled out my phone and showed him the live feed from the security cameras. "Smile, Gordon. You're starring in your own crime documentary." His face went white. "You can't use those recordings. We're family." "We're family, past tense. Now you're just trespassers who broke into my home to commit theft." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the driveway. "Interesting choice of getaway vehicle, by the way. I assume the rental car is in Lillian's name?" "Smart thinking, considering your Porsche is still in the shop getting paint thinner damage repaired." Gordon's hands clenched into fists. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you can just destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt?" "My feelings?" I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. It was cold, sharp, and completely without humor. "Gordon, this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about consequences. You and my wife made a series of choices, and now you're experiencing the results of those choices. We never meant for it to go this far. You never meant to get caught. There's a difference." I walked to my desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a manila folder thick with documents. "Would you like to see what this far actually looks like?" Before he could answer, Lillian appeared in the doorway carrying a jewelry box and wearing the expression of a woman who'd just realized she was in over her head. "Harold, please, can we talk about this rationally?" "Rationally?" I opened the folder and spread its contents across the desk. "You mean like rational adults who don't steal from their spouses, commit adultery, and break into houses in the middle of the night?" The documents told the complete story of their affair and its financial implications. Bank records, hotel receipts, photographs, recorded phone conversations, and detailed timelines of every lie they'd told and every dollar they'd stolen. "How long have you been spying on us?" Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Since the day I realized my wife was more interested in her charity board meetings than in coming home for dinner." I picked up one of the photographs, showing them together at a restaurant downtown. "March 15th, to be exact. The day you told me you were visiting your sister in Boston but actually spent the night at the Marriott with Gordon." Janet and Trish appeared in the doorway behind Lillian, their suitcases noticeably bulkier than when they'd arrived. "We should go," Janet said nervously. "This was a mistake." "Oh, it was definitely a mistake," I agreed. "But not the kind you can fix by leaving." I picked up my phone and speed-dialed a number. "Rick, they're here. All 4 of them. Yes, with the art. Perfect." Gordon grabbed my wrist. "Who are you calling?" "Security, police, my attorney. Take your pick." I pulled free from his grip and smiled. "Did you really think I'd let you walk into my house and steal from me without consequences?" The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway made everyone freeze. Through the window, I could see police cars and Rick's security team surrounding the house. "Harold, please," Lillian begged. "Think about Cassie. Think about our family." "I am thinking about family. That's why I'm making sure she never has to deal with this kind of betrayal again." I walked to the front door and opened it for the police officers approaching the porch. "Good evening, officers. Thank you for coming so quickly." The next hour was a blur of explanations, evidence presentation, and formal statements. The police were remarkably thorough in documenting the stolen art, the financial fraud, and the breaking and entering charges. Lillian, Gordon, Janet, and Trish were arrested and taken away in separate police cars, their carefully planned escape reduced to a perp walk in handcuffs. I stood on my front porch watching the taillights disappear down the driveway, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: complete and utter peace. My phone rang. Cassie's name appeared on the screen. "Dad? I just heard what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. I'm coming over." "You don't have to do that. It's late, and you're supposed to be on your honeymoon." We cut it short. Mark and I decided we'd rather be here with you than in some fancy resort pretending everything's normal. Her voice was strong, determined. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you're eating properly and not living on bourbon and revenge fantasies." I laughed, and this time it was genuine. "I love you, Cassie." "I love you too, Dad. We'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and walked back into my house, free and clear of thieves and liars and people who mistook kindness for weakness. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and court dates and the tedious process of untangling 37 years of marriage. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was exactly where I belonged.